So welcome. So you are a general partner at Trinity Ventures from the Bay Area. So as we were discussing, I'm sure that the idea of coming here, when we talked about it, whenever that was, like in July or August, but the idea of coming here in January.
I know exactly what it was. It was that Matt invited me to a very nice dinner with some of his partners, and then asked me to come out right afterwards. And I was just in the glow of like, if a VC asks you out to dinner, just know that VC, they want something.
Yes, especially if the question is asked after a lot of wine. Yes,
exactly.
In any case,
I'm just joking. Happy to be here.
We're happy that you're here. So as people know here, so we feature mostly tech startups in the data space, but we love having from time to time VCs who are active in the space, because this is as much an entrepreneurial event as it is a tech event, and we think it's super interesting to have the perspective of investors in the space. And you've been particularly active in general. You've also been active in New York. There's actually a couple of your companies that we featured at this event, Crabflower, and before that InfluxDB. So we're excited to have you tonight. So we're going to go into a bunch of things, but I was hoping to maybe just start with your background, because interestingly, especially for VC, you have a technical background, right? You did computer science at Dartmouth.
Yeah, that's right. So I have a CS degree from Dartmouth College. Actually started my career as a software engineer, and have mostly was doing entrepreneurial things before joining Trinity. So my first company, and actually thinking about this some more, I was thinking about this after you sent me the email about the topics, and it's funny, I don't really think about myself as a data guy, but pretty much almost everything I've done, either the companies that I've started or been involved in or have invested in are all data-related companies in one way or another. So started my career as a software engineer. I was the second employee at a company called Wiley Technology, which was the company that really invented the application performance management space. It was, if you're familiar with a company called New Relic, it was the predecessor company to New Relic. It was started by the same guy, a guy named Lou Cerny. It was just the traditional enterprise software version of New Relic, New Relic's cloud and freemium and all that. I'm also on the board of New Relic. Helped get Wiley off the ground, spent about 4 years there, spent about a year and a half at another venture firm, and then founded a company called Flurry, which is now part of Yahoo, but is the leading analytics service for mobile application developers. And I've been at Trinity for about 8 years now, and have invested in companies that are really based on data at their core. Companies like, you mentioned InfluxDB, New Relic, Loggly, ProtectWise, which is a security company, Crowdflower, which is a human-in-the-loop artificial intelligence company, and the list goes on.
And tangentially Docker as well.
Yeah, I mean, Docker is
less of a pure data
company. Yeah, it's less
of
a pure data company, but it's certainly a foundational technology that's making it easier for developers to work with big data systems.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about Trinity.
Sure. I'll try to keep this short. We're a pretty classic early stage venture fund. This is our 30th year in business, actually. And we just closed our 12th fund, which is a $400 million fund. We have a small team. Half of the team focuses on investing in consumer technologies. I help lead our B2B practice. And I would say just very quickly, what makes us different from other venture firms is we care deeply about building relationships with our entrepreneurs. We think by doing that and really understanding the companies that we invest in well, we can be more effective investors. And the partners at Trinity, I'll take a swipe at larger firms. We don't outsource our work to junior staff. So we have more partners per dollars in our fund than any firm in Silicon Valley, and that means that no general partner at Trinity is on more than 8 or 9 boards, and so that means we do the work for our companies, and we don't rely on other people to do that for us.
And perhaps a quick word on New York, since you have a couple of companies here, and that's how you either win the crowd or get.
Yeah, I know, and I'm kind of infamous for being kind of down on New York, and I don't want to lie to you guys. I mean, I invested in InfluxDB, and I think it's a great company, but we moved them to San Francisco. We have VTS here. I'm a seed investor in Code Climate. I just met with Brian a few hours ago. New York, to be truly honest with you, New York isn't a focus area for us. We'll invest in New York. This is like maybe unheard of. I'm like turning off a whole audience of entrepreneurs right now. But no, I mean, in all,
it's interesting to understand why.
Yeah, I mean, look. In all seriousness, we do think that the New York entrepreneurial ecosystem is getting more interesting, but we're a small firm, and there's a lot to do in the Bay Area, and still most of the value being created in the tech industry is in the Bay Area. I think to do investing, and we think to do investing in remote geographies right, you need to have people on the ground full time, not kind of parachuting in once every few months. It's really hard to get to know the ecosystem and who's the best and who's not when you're not committed to it full time. We're a small fund with a specific strategy, and we think we can make plenty of money in the Bay Area. We make exceptions to that. I've made a couple investments in New York. My partners have as well. But we're not at the point yet where we feel like we need to have staff full-time on the ground here and a partner full-time on the ground here. Maybe that'll change, and I hope you all work to change it.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So tell us about your investment thesis. I guess what gets you excited these days?
I guess I can put a data angle. I was thinking about this from a data perspective. I mean, there's a lot of things we're investing in at Trinity. There's really, I would say 2 themes that we're interested in when you think about companies that are doing things with data. I think one of these has already been stated, but it's solve problems, right, with whatever data you have. At Loggly, which is one of my portfolio companies that does log management and analytics as a cloud-based service, so think Splunk in the cloud, we talk about revealing what matters. And so, one of the things that we're looking for in data companies is not just handing the user a bunch of data and saying, hey, we've got tools for you to figure out what's interesting here, but actually companies that reveal that pull the insights out of your data and make that very easy for business users to understand what's going on without having to understand complicated query languages and things like that. So Loggly is an example in the log management space. Instead of logging in and just seeing a blank search box and the user's like, what do I do now? When you log into Loggly, you actually see some charts and graphs that help you get immediate insight into your data. I'm an investor in Duetto Research, for example, which helps hotel operators price their rooms more effectively, right? They don't have to come in and write queries. They just see, here's how my room should be priced tonight. So we're looking for more companies like that. The other area that I'm particularly interested in, and my partners are particularly interested in, is machine learning and artificial intelligence. I think we're hitting and specifically what's going on with deep learning, we're hitting. It feels like we're hitting an inflection point where AI is getting so effective that it's going to become difficult for companies to ignore. And to me, it feels like big data maybe 6 or 7 years ago, where companies were waking up and realizing we have all these data assets, we need to do something with them, and that led to the rise of Hadoop and the Hadoop vendors, and then a bunch of very successful companies in the big data space. I think we're going to see a similar trend in the AI space, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about what our portfolio company Crowdflower is doing with human-in-the-loop artificial intelligence, making AI more accessible to companies that don't have deep expertise in how to do things like deep learning.
And to the human in the loop point, what's the theory here that we need humans now to train the software, or that the final solution, I guess, will be the combination of humans and AI? Can everything be automated?
Eventually, I'm a singularitarian, so eventually, yes, we will get to the point where everything can be
in the next 5 years, not the next 50.
In the next 20 years, not, yeah, exactly. But certainly there are two reasons why we believe you do need humans in the loop. One of the reasons isn't going to go away for a long time, which is that you need training data. And big companies like Google and Facebook and Apple have access to tons and tons of training data because they're collecting an enormous amount of data from all of us every day of the year. But most companies don't have the ability to create that much training data. So one of the things that Crowdflower allows companies to do with its crowd is create lots and lots of training data, which can then be fed into models. And so that's the first part. The second part is that machine learning and while machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms, deep learning, are getting better and better, a lot of the output of models is still only, say, 80% accurate. So the question is, what do you do with the other 20%? You could say, well, I'm not going to use AI or ML at all. That seems a little bit silly. But what you can do, and what Crowdflower allows its customers to do, is feed that other 20. Say, if 80% is your threshold, then you can feed the other 20% to humans, and then use that output to retrain the model, and hopefully your model keeps getting better and better over time. So at least for I think the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be heavy involvement of humans in machine learning systems.
And as Siobhan just described, there are plenty of categories of emerging AI and ML companies, and maybe taking a step back, you can perhaps think of the landscape as a combination of horizontal AI that essentially tries to solve a wide cross-section of problems, and vertical AI, which is a much more either task-specific or industry-specific type of AI. From an investor perspective, are you interested in both, one over the other?
Right now, we're more interested in vertical AI because AI is still, and I think Crowdflower is a bit of an exception to this, but AI is really hard to use today. I mean, you need I'm guessing a lot of people in the room are familiar with how this stuff works, given that this is a data event. I mean, AI is not the type of technology that your average technologist at your average company in the world can just sit down and start using. It's just way too complex for that. Crowdflower is interesting as a horizontal platform because the way that it works, it makes AI far more accessible to the average user. You can literally just write your AI task in kind of human readable format that a human can understand, and Crowdflower can just kind of train models for you and decide which one is the best. But I think unless we see more Crowdflowers, the vertical approach is going to be a lot more successful in the near term because it won't rely on the customer to have expertise in how to do things like tune models and tune training sets and things like that.
Great. Perhaps another interesting perspective for people here who are starting companies, interested in starting companies, interested in joining companies. You hear some VCs say that they prefer to focus on companies building solutions for end users or possibly analysts, but humans. So a Duetto, for example, in your portfolio. And you're among the group of VCs that also invest heavily in developer tools, developer products, which a lot of people have historically said that's harder to find the value there because the business user with the budget is not the person that uses the product. How do you think about that spectrum and what gets you interested?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still surprised at people who don't think you can build real businesses selling to developers. I mean, we have so many success cases now, right? There's Atlassian. I mean, what a great company. GitHub, New Relic, and Docker are two of the companies that I'm on the board of. You would think that after having a whole bunch of data points, people would be investors would be more sold on the idea that you can build real big businesses selling to developers, but there's still a lot of skepticism out there. The reason why I love these businesses is that the power and the influence in technology organizations has shifted dramatically away from the classic IT group to the developer. And that's actually a wonderful thing, because in the old model, and this is what we had to deal with at Wiley, when you had an IT group intermediary, you weren't building product for the end consumer of your product. You were building it for this intermediary. And that's why enterprise software used to really suck. It's because you had to just meet all these like checklist boxes that the IT folks would put out there without regard for what your end consumer wants. Now, in this new world, with the power moving away from the IT group and towards developers, you can actually build great products. And companies like New Relic and companies like GitHub have built great products, and companies like Docker, and that's why that's why all these they've been able to build so much value, and you're able to build business models that are just so much more delightful to operate than the old enterprise software model of where we're paying really expensive sales reps to shove software down people's throats, and we're praying on the last day of every quarter that we're going to close enough deals to make our quota. And in these types of businesses, your customers can just, a lot of these businesses are basically direct to consumer businesses or direct to developer businesses. People can just sign up and use the software without needing to talk to anybody. They can swipe a credit card, and you have subscription revenue coming in, and you're doing business all the time. And you look at companies like at New Relic today. I shouldn't say the number of customers because I don't remember what's in our public filings, but we have thousands of customers versus the 500 customers we had at Wiley when we were acquired by CA. I mean, it's just so much more satisfying to touch tons and tons of customers instead of just a small, wealthy few. So anyway, we love these businesses at Trinity. I'm looking for more and more of these businesses, and I like them a lot better than the traditional enterprise software business.
Great. So perhaps just one or two last questions from me, and then I will open it up to people. It's also interesting from an audience perspective to understand what you don't like. And perhaps specifically some examples of categories where you think there's just been too much action, too much investment, or the business case is not strong enough.
Sure. Well, I just said that I don't love traditional enterprise software businesses. My partners might kill me for that too, because some of them do invest in those types of things. But I'm probably not the right person at Trinity to pitch on one of those. The big data platforms. And data analytics tools. There's just so many undifferentiated. If we want to keep this conversation in the data realm, there are so many undifferentiated products and services out there. And I think the advice that was given by the earlier speakers of solving problems, specific problems for the customer, instead of just trying to be horizontal in, we have a better query engine, a faster query engine, or more efficient storage, or more visualizations than the next vendor. We see a lot of that stuff every day, and it's hard to build a business on those things.
Great. Open it up to questions if there are any. So what will people think? Okay. Andrew will
I am so uninteresting that nobody has any questions for me.
I think you're
you're the most interesting.
Yes.
No, I was just wondering, so you talked a little bit about sort of traditional dev tools businesses. When you think about sort of the AI machine learning tools for that set of people, which you wouldn't necessarily call devs, they're a different group. Do you think about those businesses differently, or do they follow the same models as sort of the traditional dev tools business?
I think I would maybe call that direct to data scientist business, and maybe it's not data science. I think it probably is data scientist. Maybe it's a different term, but I think you can build a similar business to the direct to developer tool businesses. There's no reason why not. I don't think that data scientists enjoy being sold to any more than developers do. Mostly they're overwhelmed with work they have to do. They have everybody in their organizations asking them for stuff. And the last thing they want to do is have to do lengthy evaluations of software. And lengthy training sessions to be able to use new products and services. And, it's much more efficient to them if they can just, go to a website and start using something. So I think there's no reason why you can't build a similar type of business model in the data space. And you can go to Crowdflower's website, by the way, and just sign up and start using it.
Thank you.
In the kind of investments that you just described for the DevOps, do you really see a power law kind of distribution, which Peter Thiel famously describes in his 0 to 1 book?
Sorry,
the power law distribution
of what?
In terms of your product and its usage and its consumption, do you see the power law distribution happening in it?
Oh, in these direct to developer?
Or direct to data scientist or direct to scientist?
I've been surprised at New Relic and looking at financial results of Atlassian and other companies that I've seen in the developer space, in that, the old, I think this is what you mean by power law, but the assumption was always that 80% of your revenue would come from 20% of your customers.
Right.
The revenue is far more, in a way, it's more spread out, it's more democratized than ever before. These companies are less dependent on big customers than ever before, which I think is ultimately a good thing for the ecosystem, because if your business is really dependent on a small number of large, wealthy customers, you start to cater your products and services to those types of companies, and you forget about everybody else. And so I think it's great that companies like New Relic and Atlassian, for example, have thriving SMB businesses and can service the entire market and choose to service the entire market instead of just a small slice of it.
So eventually your idea would be to have them serve as platforms so that they're an entry point, and then eventually try to service the entire market through other services as well. Because otherwise there would be just a finite number of developers, even though the population is growing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how you build these business models, how you think about your go-to-market, how you think about pricing and packaging to be able to service the entire market is, it's an interesting discussion. It's really complicated. We probably don't have time for it now. But I love talking about how to build these types of businesses. So if anyone here ever wants to talk about that, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, that was going to be actually sort of my last question, and obviously hard to summarize all of this in just a couple of minutes. But maybe tell us a little bit about the New Relic, story. This amazing company, right, that you were associated with from the beginning. Any sort of impressions or lessons learned from a rocket ship? About was it the entrepreneur because Lou was great? Was it the timing because the DevOps market was exploding? Was it everything? Anything that we can learn as an audience from that experience?
There's so many lessons learned from New Relic. I couldn't possibly go through all of it now. Like anything, one of the things I've come to believe is that in building successful companies, is there's no silver bullet. You're lying to yourself if you point back and you say it was this one thing that we did that made the company successful. It's the same thing with failure. It's never one thing. And there were a lot of things that went right at New Relic. Some of them were pure dumb luck. Same is true for Docker, by the way, because if any of you here know the Docker story, it was a failing company that pivoted, and the pivot worked in a big way. But some of it at New Relic was in a way dumb luck. And maybe I'm not doing it justice by calling it that, but New Relic was in many ways a reaction to Lou Cerny started Wiley and he started New Relic, and it was a reaction to Wiley. And there were a bunch of things that Lou and I and the other folks involved in Wiley really didn't like about Wiley. And so Lou just decided to start the opposite business. Well, if you don't want to do enterprise sales, for example, because that was something that Lou didn't want to do, and for the first 3 or 4 years of the company, he refused to hire any sales reps, well, then you better have a damn good product. Because if you can't have people go talk to your customers and help them use the product, if you're not allowed to do that, the product better be easy enough to use that it sells itself. Turned out to be a totally brilliant move, because not hiring any sales reps put all this pressure on the product team to build something really, really great, because otherwise the company would have failed. I'm trying to think if there are any other good, really good lessons learned. Here's an interesting lesson. I think that most of the time, the way that we hire people in the industry is that we look for folks who have done the thing that we want before, and the danger in that is using the wrong lens. So we had a big decision to make in the early days of New Relic when we were building the team. It was, did we hire people with experience in the IT systems management space and in application performance management or not? And we made the decision to hire these two guys, Matt Cooley as director of sales and Patrick Moran as our VP of marketing. And neither of them had tech, and this was a tough decision, and it was controversial at the time. Neither of them had IT, neither of them were technical guys. Neither of them had systems management experience. They didn't I'm not sure that they understood what we even did as a company. But the thing that they knew how to do really well, because it was in their backgrounds, was how to sell to small businesses. So they knew how to market and sell directly to the end consumer of a product in a professional setting. And that turned out to be the experience, exactly the experience that we needed. So I guess, and they were, those two guys, not single-handedly, but we would not have gotten to 100 million in revenue without them. They were a huge part of it, and they are enormously talented guys. And so when you're thinking about hiring people with experience, it's not that experience is bad. It's make sure you're hiring people with the right experience and really try to understand what that means, because it can be non-obvious. And I could talk all night about other lessons, from New Relic, because it's a fascinating company. But I know we're probably already going over, so I'll stop.
Yeah. No, this is great. Well, thanks very much for being here, for sharing. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.